Okay, let's do reading and facial. uh, this is a sunny day, and I woke up a little bit early, about 7. My dogs, they just get the thread off because the surgery. They they sew the skin together with the thread. I don't know in English is that. Then we got we took them to the white to get the thread out. um, and they want to go for a walk. Yesterday, this is the first time we went for a walk. um, and this is so funny. I had a class, TAFE course. Then when I finished, they just feel it. They just felt it. I finished my class. Then Sherry went to get their leash and took to me and want to go for a walk. And I said, okay, then I'll took you go for a walk. Then this morning I got, because they normally when I got up, Bessie will just jump down and go and jump down my bed. But Sherry, she only lay down there and have a good sleep till the last person who woke up. Then then I asked her in a very low voice. I said, "Do you want to go walk?" Then she just jumped up, and jumped down the bed. Then I took them to go for a walk. That's so funny, and we can read about 1 hour because I have a Chinese tutoring this morning. We have 10 to 11, 2 to 3, 3 past 3 past 30 to 4 past 30, and then 5 to 6 or 7. So today is a busy day. Great. Then let's read. Last time we read here, they go on the, I think we already finished here. Okay, let's just read it. Besides, they hope to find more food on the way. As the glasses had been returned to the watches of the engineer and the reporter. Pencroft burned a little line to serve as tinder. As to flint, it would not be wanting in as to flint, it would not as to flint, that would not be wanting in those regions of plutonic origin. It was 7:30 in the morning when the explorer armed with sticks left the chimney. Following Pencroft's advice, it appeared best to take the road already traversed through the forest and to return by another route. It was also the most direct way to reach the mountain. They turned the north angle and followed the left bank of the river, which was abandoned at the point which it formed an elbow towards the southwest. The path already trod under the green tree was found, and at 9 o'clock, Cruz Harding and his company had reached the western border of the forest. The ground till then very little undulated, boggy at first, dry and undulated, undulated. We checked it. Oh my word! It can't, save ultimately. That's not good. So let's see. Undulated, undulated,起伏起伏 very little undulated body at first. Very little undulated 起伏 So 没有起伏就是非常平坦的起伏的 The ground still then very little undulated body at first. Body 多沼泽的沼泽的 Can you hear the fly? When I let my dog in, a fly flies in. At first, dry and sandy afterward. Okay, very little undulated body at first, dry and sandy afterwards. Had a gentle slope, which ascended from the shore towards the interior of the country. A few very timid animal was seen under the forest tree. Top quickly started them, but his master soon called him back, for the time hadn't come to commence hunting. That would be attended to later. Commence hunting. That would be contended to later. The engineer was not a man who would allow himself to be diverted from his fixed idea. It might even have been said that he didn't observe the country at all. The country at all, either in its configuration or in its natural productions, his great aim being to climb the mountain. It might have been said that he didn't observe the country at all, either in his configuration or its natural production. His great aim being to climb the mountain before him, and therefore straight forward he went. At 10 o'clock, a halt of a few minutes was made. On leaving the forest, the mountain system of the country appeared before the explorers. The mountain was composed of two cones. The first truncated, 削平的 truncated at the head of about 2,500 feet, was sustained by buttresses, which appeared to branch out like the talon at the talon of an immense claw set on the ground, between which appeared to branch out like the talon of an immense claw set on the ground. Talon, like the talon, 也是爪 like the talon of a 爪。Okay, of an immense claw set on the ground. Between this were narrow valleys, bristling with trees, the last clumps of which rose to the top of the lowest cone. There appeared to be less vegetation, on that side of the mountain, which was exposed to the northeast, and deep fissures could be seen, which no doubt were watercourses, was exposed to the northeast, and deep fissure. 狭长的裂缝 fissures 分裂缝 deep fissure could be seen. And deep fissures could be seen, which no doubt were watercourses. On the first cone rested a second, slightly rounded and placed a little on one side, like a great round that had cooked over the air. On the first cone rested a second, slightly rounded, and placed a little on one side, like a great round head cooked over the air. A Scotchman would have said his bonnet was a what? It appeared formed of bare earth here and there, pierced by the reddest rock. They wished to reach the second cone and proceed along the ridge. They wished to reach the second cone and proceeding along the ridge of the spurs seemed to be the best way by which to gain it. They wished to reach the second cone and proceeding along the ridge of the spur seemed to be the best way by which to gain it. And proceeding along the seemed to be the best way by which to gain it. Okay, we are on volcanic. We are on volcanic ground. We are on volcanic ground. Cruz Harding had said. Cruz Harding had said. Open the door. No, come here. Good. Good. Come here. That's it. And we are on volcanic ground. Let's check. Volcanic. That's sound not good. Volcanic is. It is volcanic. Let's see.
Volcano.
Volcano. This is volcanic. Cyrus Harding had said, and his companies followed him. We are on volcanic ground. Cyrus Harding had said, and his company followed him, began to ascend backwards on the back of a spur, which by the winding and consequently more accessible path joined the first plateau. The ground had evidently been convulsed by subterranean force. Had evidently been convulsed by subterranean force. Here and there, stray blocks, numerous debris of basalt and pumice stone were met with. In isolated groups rose fir trees, which some 100 feet lower, at the bottom of the narrow gorges, formed massive sheets, almost impenetrable to the sun rays. Let's see what's narrow gorges of the峡谷. Yes, 峡谷. At the bottom of the narrow gorge formed massive sheets almost impenetrable to the sun rays. During the first part of the ascent, Herbert remarked on the footprint which indicated the recent passage of large animal. Perhaps this beast will not let us pass by willingly, said the telegraph. Well, replied the reporter, who had already hunted the tiger in India. And the lion in Africa. We shall soon learn how successful to encounter them. But in the meantime, we must be upon our guard. They They ascended but slowly. This distance increased by detours and obstacles which could not be surmounted directly, was long. Sometimes, too, the ground suddenly fell, and they found themselves on the edge of a deep um, chasm, which they had to go round. Deep chasm, though which they had to go round. Thus, in retracing their steps so as to find some practicable path, much time was employed. And fatigue and undergone for nothing. At 12 o'clock, when the small band of adventurers halted for breakfast at the foot of a large group of firs near a little stream which fell in uh, cas- cascades, they found themselves still halfway from the first plateau, which most probably they would not reach till nightfall. From this point, the view of the sea was much extended, but on the right, the high uh, promontory prevented their seeing whether there was land beyond. On the left, the set extended. The, on the left, the set extended. On the left, the site extended several miles to the north, but on the northwest, at the point occupied by the explorers, it was cut short by the ridge of a fantastic surfed spur, which formed a powerful support of the central core. But on the northwest, at the point occupied by the explorers, it was cut short by a ridge of a fantastic shaped spur, which formed直线，激励直线马边。这样的来理解吧。Which formed a powerful support of the central core. At 1 o'clock, the ascent was continued. They slanted more towards the southwest, and again they slanted more towards the southwest, and again entered among thick bushes. They are under the shade. Under the shade of the trees, flattered several couple of gallinaceae belong to the peasant species. They were tragopans, ornamented by a pendant skin which hung over their throats, and by two small round horns planted behind the eyes. Among these birds, there under the shade of the tree fluttered several couple of those belongs to a pheasant species. They were ornamented by the pendant skin, which hung over their throat. Oh, no, I think this, I know what this look like. And by two small round horns, which hung over their throat, and by two small round horns, planted behind the eyes. Among these birds, which were about the size of a fowl, the female were uniformly brown, while the male was gorgeous in his red plumage, decorated with white spots, split with a stone cleverly and vigorously thrown, killed one of these uh, trapans, on which on which Pencroff made hungry by the fresh air, had cast greedy eyes. After leaving the region of bushes, the party, assisted by resting on each other's shoulder. The party, assisted by resting on each other's shoulders, climbed for about 100 feet up a deep acclivity and a steep acclivity and reached a level place, which very few trees, where the soil appeared volcanic. It was necessary to ascend by zigzag to make the slope more easy, for it was very steep, and the foot being extremely precaution, and the footing being exceedingly precautions, required the greatest caution. Neb and Herbert took the lead, Pencroff the rear, the captain and the reporter between them. The animals frequented this hat, and there were numerous trees of them. Must necessarily belong to those races of Shoefoot and Supple-span and Supple-span, Comurus or goat. 说 maybe 是偶蹄的。I think I got hay fever around this time. In Melbourne, around this time, a lot of people got hay fever because we have a lot of flower. For all of a sudden, several were seen, but this was not the same Pencroft gave them. For all sudden sheep, she shouted, all stopped about 50 feet from half a dozen animals of a large size, with with strong horns, bent back and flattened towards the point, with a woolly fleece hidden under long silky hair of a tawny color. They were not ordinary sheep, but a species usually found in the mountainous region of the temperate zone, to which Herbert gave the name of the Sussman. Have they legs and chops? Asked the sailor. Yes, replied Heber. Well, then they are sheep, said Pencroft. The animals, motionless among the block of basalt, gazed with the block of basalt. That's basalt. Let's see what basalt is. We already checked it. 玄武岩，玄武岩，玄。Among the block of basalt, let's see, ba or bear. Basalt. Gazed with astonished eyes, as if they saw human bats for the first time, as if they saw human bats for the first time. Then their fear suddenly arose. They disappeared, bounding over the rock. Goodbye till we meet again, cried Pencroft, as he watched them in such a comical tone that Cyrus Harding, Spilett, Herbert, and Neb could not help laughing. The ascent was continued. Here and there were traces of lava. Sulphur springs sometimes stopped their way, and they had to go round them. In some places, the sulphur had formed crystal among other substances, such as whitish cinders made of an infinity of little feldspar crystal. Let's see, what sulphur? Oh, 硫磺。Sulphur. In approaching the first plateau formed by the that's so bad. Hope when I have class, it won't happen. There only remained here and there a few twisted stumped pines, which must have had a hard life in resisting at this altitude the high wind from the open sea. Happily for the engineer and his companions, the weather was beautiful, the atmosphere tranquil, for a high breeze at an elevation For a high breeze at an elevation of 3,000 feet would have hindered their proceeding. For a high breeze at an elevation of 3,000 feet would have hindered their proceeding. The purity of the sky at the zenith was felt through the transparent air. A perfect calm reign around them. They could not see the sun. They then hid by the vast screen of the upper cone, which masked the half horizon of the west, and whose enormous shading stretching to the shore increased as the radiant luminary sank in its diurnal course. In its diurnal. Oh, diurnal. We already checked it. 白天的。Vapor, mist rather than cloud. Vapor, mist rather than cloud began to appear in the east, and assume all the prismatic color. Under the influence of the solar rays. 500 feet only separated the explorers from the Pluto. 500 feet only separated the explorers from the Pluto, which they wished to reach so as to establish their encampment for the night. But these 500 feet were increased to more than 2 miles by the zigzag. But these 500 feet were increased to more than 2 miles. But these 500 feet were increased to more than 2 miles by the zigzag which they had to describe. The soil as it were solid, slid under their feet. The slope often presented such an angle that they slipped when the stone torn by the air. They slip when the stone torn by the air didn't give a sufficient support. Evening came on by degrees. And it was almost night when Cyrus Harding and his companies, master fatigued by an ascent of 7 hours, arrived at the plateau of the first cone. It was then necessary to prepare an encampment and to restore their strength by eating first and sleep forward afterward. This second stage of the mountain rose on a This second stage of the mountain rose on a base of rock, among which it would be easy to find a retreat. Fuel was not abundant. However, a fire could be made by means of the moss and dry brushwood, which covered certain part of the plateau. While the sailor was preparing his hearth with stone, which he put to this use. Neb and Herbert occupied themselves with getting a supply of fuel. They soon returned with a load of brushwood. The steel was struck. The burn line caught the spark of a flint, and under Neb's breath and crackling fire showed itself in a few minutes under the shelter of the rocks. Their object in lighting a fire was only to enable them to withstand the cold temperature of the night, as it was not employed in cooking the bird, which Neb kept for the next day. The remains of the capybara and some dozen of the stone-pan almond formed their supper. It was not 6:30 when all was finished. Cyrus Harding then thought of exploring in the half-light of the large circular layer which supported the upper cone of the mountain. Before taking any rest, he wished to know if it was possible to get round the base of the cone in the case of its sides being too steep and its summit being inaccessible. This question preoccupied him, for it was possible that from the way the head inclined, that is to say, towards the north, the plateau was not practicable. Also, if the summit of the mountain could not be reached on one side, and if on the other they could not get round the base of the cone, it would be impossible to survey the western part of the country, and their object in making the ascent would in part be altogether unattained. The engineer, accordingly, regardless of fatigue, leaving Pencroft and Neb to arrange the bed and Spilett to note the incident of the day, began to follow the edge of the plateau going towards the north. Herbert accompanied him. The night was beautiful and still. The dark was not very deep. Cyrus Harding and the boy walked near each other without speaking. In some places, without speaking. In some places, the plateau opened before them, and they passed without hindrance. In the other, obstructed by rocks, there were only a narrow path in which two persons could not walk abreast. After a walk of 20 minutes, Cyrus Harding and Herbert were obliged to stop. From this point, the slope of the two cones became one. One shoulder here, no shoulder here separated the two parts of the mountain. The slope being inclined on almost 70 degrees, the path became impracticable. But if the engineer and the boy were obliged to give up thought of following the circle direction, in return, an opportunity was given for ascending the cone. But if the engineer and the cone was obliged to give up thought of following the circle direction, in return an opportunity was given for ascending the cone. In fact, before them opened a deep hollow. It was the rocked mouth of the crater, by which the eruptive liquid matter had escaped at the period when the volcano was still in activity. Hardened lava and crushed soil formed a sort of natural staircase of large steps, which would greatly facilitate the ascent to the summit of the mountain. Harding took all this in at a glance, and without hesitating followed the lad. He entered the enormous chasm. In the midst of an increasing obscurity. There was still ahead of 1,000 feet to overcome, but the interior acclivities of the crater be practicable. It would soon be seen. The persevering engineer resolved to continue his ascent until he was stopped. Happily, these acclivities wound up the interior of the volcano and favored their ascent. As to the volcano itself, it could not be doubted that it was completely extinct. No smoke escaped from its side. No smoke escaped from its side. Not a flame. Not a flame could be seen in the dark hollows. Not a row, not a matter. Not a matter, no trembling even issued from its black well, which perhaps reached far into the bowels of the earth. The atmosphere inside the crater was filled with no sulfurous vapor. It was more than the sleep of a it's more than a sleep of a volcano. It was its complete extinction. It was its complete extinction. Cyrus Harding's attempt would succeed. Little by little, Herbert and he climbing up the side of the interior saw the crater widen above their head. The radius of the circular portion of the sky framed by the edge of the cone. The radius of this circle portion of the sky framed by the edge of the cone increased obviously at each step, as it were, that the explorers made fresh stars entered the field of their vision. The magnificent constellations, the magnificent constellations of the southern sky shine resplendently, shine res, resp, resplend, resp, res, resplendent, resplendently. As the zenith glittered, the splendid Arcturus in the scorpion, and not far was Alpha Centauri, which is believed to be the nearest star to the believed to be the nearest star to the terrestrial globe. Then, as the crater widened, appeared the formula of the fish. The southern triangle, and lastly, nearly at the Arctic pole, the greater Southern Cross, which replaced the pole star of the pole star of the southern hemisphere. It was nearly 8 o'clock when Cyrus Harding. It was nearly 8 o'clock when Cyrus Harding and Herbert set foot on the highest ridge of the mountain at the summit of the cone. It was then perfectly dark, and their gaze could not extend over a radius of 2 miles. But the sea surrounded the unknown line. Did the sea surround this unknown line, or was it connected in the west with some continent of the Pacific? It could not yet be made out. Towards the west, a cloudy belt A cloudy belt, clearly visible as the horizon, increased gloom, and the eye could not discover if the sky and the water were blended together in the same circular line. But at the point of the horizon, a weaker light suddenly appeared, which descended slowly in proportion at the cloud mountain to the zenith. We need to check what zenith 顶点 mounted the zenith. It was the slender crescent moon. It was the slender crescent moon, already almost disappearing, but its light was sufficient to show clearly the horizontal line, then detached from the cloud, and the engineer could see its reflection trembling for an instant on a liquid surface. Cyrus Harding seized the lad's hand, and in a grave voice, "An island," said he, "at the moment when the lunar crescent disappeared beneath the wave." Crescent，那个叫什么月？新月，月牙，哦。The lunar crescent disappeared beneath the 月牙。新月。Slender. Let's see what slender is. 苗条的。A slender crescent moon. Okay. Half an hour later, Cyrus Harding, half an hour later, Cyrus Harding and Herbert had returned to the encampment. The engineer merely told his companies that the land upon which fate had thrown them was an island, and that the next day they would consult. Then each settled himself as well as he could to sleep, and in that rocky hole, at a height of 2,000 feet, 500 feet above the level of the sea, through a peaceful night, the islander enjoyed profound repose. The next day, the 17th of March, after a hasty breakfast, which consisted solely of the roasted tragopan, the engineer wished to climb again to the summit. The engineer wishes to climb again to the summit of the volcano so as more attentively to survey the island upon which he and his company were imprisoned for life, perhaps. Should the island be situated at a great distance from any land, or if it was out of the course of or if it was out of the course of vessels which visit the archipelagos of the Pacific Ocean. This time, his companies followed him in the next exploration. They also wished to see the island on the production of which they must depend for the supply of all their wants. It was about 7 o'clock in the morning when Cyrus Harding, Herbert, Pencroft, Spilett, and Neb quit the encampment. No one appeared to be anxious about their situation. They had faith in themselves, doubtless, but it must be observed that the basis of this faith was not the same with Harding as with his company. The engineer had confidence because he felt capable of extorting from this wild country. With the wild country, extorting. He felt capable of extorting from this wild country every necessary for the life of himself and his company. The latter fears nothing just because Cyrus Harding was with them. Pencroft, especially since the incident of the related fair, would not have despair for an instant, even if he was on the bare rock, if the engineer was with him on the rock. "Phil," said he, "we left Richmond without permission from the authorities. It will be hard if we don't manage to get away someday or other from a place where certainly no one will detain us." Cyrus Harding followed the same road as the evening before. They went round the corn. By the plateau which formed the shoulder to the mouth of the enormous chasm. We saw these words a lot of time. Vehicle.
Chasm.
Chasm. Enormous chasm. 裂缝. The weather was magnificent. The sun rose in a pure sky and flooded with his ray all the eastern side of the mountain. The crater was reached. It was just what the engineer had made. It was just what the engineer had made it ought to be in the dark. That is to say, a vast funnel which widened to a height of 1,000 feet above the plateau. The crater was reached. It was just what the engineer had made it ought to be in the dark. That is to say, a vast funnel which widened to a height of 1,000 feet above the plateau. Below the chasm, Below the chasm, large thick streaks of lava would over the side of the mountain, and thus mark the course of the eruptive matter to the slow valley which furrowed the northern part of the island. The interior of the crater, whose inclination didn't exceed 35 to 40 degrees, presented no difficulty, no obstacle to the ascent. Traces of very ancient lava were noticed. Traces of ancient lava 火山岩 were noticed. Were noticed, which probably had overflowed the summit of the cone. Before this lateral chasm had opened a new way to it. As to the volcanic chimney, which established a communication between the subterranean layer and the crater, its depth could not be calculated with the eye, for it was lost in obscurity. But there was no doubt as to the complete extinct of the volcano. Before 8 o'clock, Harding and his companions were assembled at the summit of the crater. On the conical mount which swelled the north edge. The sea everywhere, they cried, as if their lips could not restrain the word which made Iceland of them. The sea indeed formed an immense circular sheet of water all around them. Perhaps on climbing again to the summit of the cone, Cyrus Harding had a hope of discovering some coast, some island shore which he had not been able to perceive in the dark the evening before, but nothing appeared on the farthest verge of the horizon. This is to say, over a radius of more than 50 miles. No land in sight, not a sail. Over all this immense space, the ocean alone was visible. The island occupied the center of a circumference which appeared to be infinite. Okay, let's stop here. I have a class in a few minutes. Yes, great. Let's stop here.